They say the devil looks after his own, but on a rainy Tuesday in Chicago, the devil was nowhere to be found. Don Lorenzo Moretti, the man who held the city's underworld in his iron grip, was on his knees. Not in prayer, but in defeat. Inside the sterile walls of the St. Jude private wing, 17 of the world's most expensive specialists had just given up. His son, Santino, was dying. They had run every test, tried every experimental drug, and failed. They were packing their bags while a 24-year-old heir gasped for air. But they weren't looking at the patient anymore. They were looking at charts. They missed the one detail that was staring them right in the face. A detail only a girl making minimum wage, a girl nobody even looked at, was about to see. And that mistake would change everything. The silence on the 12th floor of St. Jude's Hospital was heavier than lead. This wasn't a normal hospital wing. This was the Sterling Wing, a place where names didn't go on clipboards and security cameras were turned off upon request. Tonight, the entire floor was on lockdown. Men in dark suits with earpieces and bulging shoulder holsters lined the hallway every 10 feet. They stood like statues, but their eyes were darting, nervous. They knew what was happening inside room 1204. They knew that if the heart monitor inside that room stopped beeping, most of them wouldn't survive the night. Inside the suite, the air smelled of antiseptic and expensive cologne. Don Lorenzo Moretti stood by the window, staring out at the grey Chicago skyline. He was a man who usually commanded a room just by breathing, but today he looked shrunken. His grey suit was impeccably tailored, but his shoulders were slumped. Behind him, a heated argument was being whispered. "It's systemic organ failure, Dr. Thorne. There is nothing left to operate on," a voice hissed. That was Dr. Sterling himself, the head of the hospital. "I'm telling you, the white blood cell count indicates an autoimmune collapse," another doctor argued. This was Dr. Aris Thorne, a specialist flown in from Switzerland 3 hours ago on a private jet. "But the treatments aren't working. It's like his body is rejecting his own blood." Lorenzo turned around slowly. The room went silent instantly. "I am not paying you $3 million to debate," Lorenzo said. His voice was quiet, a low rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. "I am paying you to wake him up." Dr. Thorne stepped forward, adjusting his rimless glasses. He looked terrified. "Don Moretti, we have run the panels, toxicology, oncology, virology. We have 17 opinions here. The consensus is unanimous. Santino's heart is failing. The tissue is necrotic. We can keep him comfortable, but—" "Comfortable?" Lorenzo walked over to the bed. Lying in the center of the nest of wires and tubes was Santino Moretti. 3 days ago, he had been the most feared and eligible bachelor in the city. 6'2", sharp-witted and ruthless. Now, he looked like a wax figure melting under heat. His skin was a translucent grey, his breathing ragged and shallow. Sweat matted his dark hair to his forehead. "He is 25 years old," Lorenzo whispered, looking down at his only son. "He went to dinner on Friday. He collapsed on Saturday. And on Tuesday, you tell me he is gone. It's a rare pathogen," Dr. Sterling lied, trying to save his own skin. "Something distinct. Maybe something he picked up overseas." "He hasn't left the city in 6 months," Lorenzo snapped. He slammed his hand on the side rail of the bed, making the doctors jump. "Fix him, or none of you leave this floor." The threat hung in the air, genuine and terrifying. In the corner of the room, near the bathroom door, there was a faint squeak of rubber on linoleum. Nobody noticed. It was just the help. Elena Ricci kept her head down. She gripped the handle of her mop bucket so tight her knuckles were white. She wasn't supposed to be here. The usual cleaning crew for the VIP wing had been dismissed for security reasons, but someone had spilled a tray of coffee and blood samples near the door, and sanitation was mandatory. Elena was 22, invisible and exhausted. She was a nursing student who had dropped out 2 semesters ago when her mother got sick and the money ran out. Now, she scrubbed floors in the very hospital where she had dreamed of saving lives. She moved the mop rhythmically, inching closer to the bed. She knew she shouldn't look. The men in the suits outside had patted her down twice. They had told her, clean the floor, eyes on the floor, mouth shut. But she couldn't help listening. She heard the doctors listing the medications: corticosteroids, epinephrine, broad-spectrum antibiotics, chelating agents in case of heavy metal poisoning. They were throwing the kitchen sink at him. Elena moved closer to the bed to wipe a spot of spilled saline. She was close enough to smell the metallic tang of sickness coming off the young man. She risked a glance. Santino looked terrible. But it wasn't the grey skin that caught her eye. It was his hands. His hand was hanging off the side of the bed, limp. The expensive pulse oximeter was clipped to his index finger, but Eleanor was looking at his fingernails. She paused. She knew that texture. She knew those ridges. "Girl!" Dr. Thorne barked. Eleanor jumped, nearly knocking over her bucket. Sorry, sir." "Get that filth away from the sterile field," Thorne sneered, taking out his frustration on the easiest target. "This is a medical crisis, not a janitorial convention. Get out." "Yes, sir," Elena whispered. She pulled her bucket back, but she didn't leave. Her eyes darted back to Santino's hand, then to his neck. There was a faint, almost invisible spiderweb pattern of blue veins tracing up from his collarbone. It can't be, she thought. They would have checked for that. They're the best doctors in the world. "Dr. Thorne," Dr. Sterling said, looking at the monitors. "BP is dropping. 80/50. We're losing him." "Push 50 cc's of adrenaline," Thorne shouted. "No." The word ripped out of Elena's throat before she could stop it. The room froze. Don Lorenzo turned his head slowly toward the corner. The doctors looked at her as if a cockroach had just started speaking French. "What did you say?" Lorenzo asked. Elena was trembling. This was it. She was going to be fired. Or worse, judging by the bulge in the Don's jacket, she was going to be shot. "I said no," Elena said, her voice shaking, but her eyes locked on Lorenzo. "If you give him adrenaline right now, with his heart rate that erratic, you'll kill him instantly." "Get her out of here," Dr. Thorne scoffed, waving a hand at the guards by the door. "She's a cleaning lady." 2 massive guards stepped into the room. One reached for Elena's arm. "Wait." Lorenzo held up a hand. The guards stopped. The Mafia Don looked at the girl in the oversized blue scrubs, her hair messy, her shoes worn out. He saw fear in her eyes, but he saw something else too. Certainty. "Why?" Lorenzo asked. "Because it's not heart failure," Eleanor blurted out. "And it's not a pathogen. Look at his fingernails." Dr. Thorne rolled his eyes. "His fingernails. We are looking at MRIs of his brain stem, you ignorant." "Look at the white horizontal lines," Elena shouted, stepping forward, dodging the guard's hand. She pointed at Santino's limp hand. "They're called Mises lines. And look at the veins in his neck. That's spider webbing. That's not a rash. That's vascular breakdown." She looked straight at Dr. Thorne. "You're treating him for an infection. But he's not sick. He's being poisoned." A pin drop could have been heard in the room. "Poisoned," Lorenzo repeated, the word coming out like a growl. "My son has been in this room for 3 days. Only doctors and family have been near him." "It's thallium," Elena said, breathless. "Or maybe arsenic. But with the hair loss." She pointed to the pillow where clumps of Santino's dark hair had fallen out. "I'd bet my life it's thallium. It's odorless, tasteless. It mimics the flu, then organ failure. If you give him adrenaline, you'll speed up the toxin's absorption into the heart muscle. He needs Prussian blue." "Right now." Dr. Thorne laughed. It was a cold, cruel sound. "Thallium? That's ridiculous. That's a rat poison from the 1950s. Nobody uses that. This is a complex viral load." "Did you test for it?" Elena challenged him. Thorne paused. He looked at Sterling. Sterling looked at the floor. "We ran a standard tox screen," Sterling mumbled. "Thallium. It requires a specific heavy metal panel. It's not standard." "You didn't test for it," Lorenzo realized. The Don walked over to the doctor. He grabbed Thorne by the lapels of his $3,000 suit and shoved him against the wall. "You told me you tested everything. It's impossible," Thorne squeaked. How would... Lorenzo let him go and turned to Eleanor. "You said Prussian blue?" "Yes," Eleanor nodded. "It binds to the thallium in the gut. It stops the absorption. It's the only antidote." "We don't have that in the crash cart," a nurse whispered, terrified. It's an industrial antidote. We'd have to get it from the basement pharmacy." Lorenzo pulled a silver pistol from his jacket. He didn't point it at Eleanor. He pointed it at Dr. Thorne. "You have 5 minutes," Lorenzo said calmly. "Go to the basement. Get what the cleaning girl asked for. If my son dies, you die. If she's wrong," he turned his dark, cold eyes to Eleanor. "If you're wrong, child, then you'll be buried right next to him." The next 3 hours were a blur of controlled chaos. Eleanor was forced to stand in the corner, a guard named Luca standing over her. Luca was huge, with a scar running down his cheek, but he looked at Eleanor with a strange mix of pity and curiosity. "You better be right, kid," Luca whispered out of the side of his mouth. "The Don, he doesn't do mistakes." Elena didn't answer. She watched as the nurses pushed a thick, blue slurry down a nasogastric tube into Santino's stomach. She watched the heart monitor. Beep, beep, beep. It was erratic, fast, then slow. Dr. Thorne was sweating profusely. He was pacing back and forth, muttering about lawsuits and medical malpractice. "She's insane. It's a coincidence. Mises' lines can be caused by renal failure. We are killing him with this pigment." 30 minutes passed. Suddenly the machine began to alarm, a high-pitched whine. "He's crashing!" Thorne yelled. "I told you! The Prussian blue is interacting with the other meds. Ventricular fibrillation!" Elena felt her knees buckle. No, I saw it. I know I saw it. Clear!" the nurse shouted, charging the paddles. Thump! Santino's body arched off the bed. Flat line. Lorenzo let out a sound that was half scream, half sob. He turned toward Eleanor, his face twisted in a mask of pure rage. He raised the gun. "Wait!" Eleanor screamed. "Look at the monitor, not the heart rate, the oxygen saturation." Lorenzo paused, his finger on the trigger. On the screen, the number had been hovering at a deadly 82%. Even as his heart stopped, the number flickered. 83%. 85%. "Hit him again!" Lorenzo roared at the doctors. "Clear!" Thump. A beat, then another. Beep, beep, beep. Stronger this time. Steady! Sinus rhythm returned. The nurse gasped. She looked at the blood pressure monitor. BP is stabilizing. 110/70. It's working. The toxin is being bound. Dr. Thorne looked like he had seen a ghost. He rushed to the bed, checking Santino's pupils. He looked back at Lorenzo, his face pale. The girl was right, Thorne whispered. "The seizures have stopped. His color is returning." Lorenzo didn't look at the doctor. He holstered his gun. He walked slowly across the room, past the stunned specialists, past the weeping nurses, until he stood directly in front of Eleanor. She was shaking so hard, the mop bucket rattled. She braced herself for a slap or a yell. Instead, Lorenzo Moretti took her hand. His palms were rough, calloused. He bowed his head, kissing her knuckles, a gesture of respect usually reserved for other dons. "What is your name?" he asked. "Elena. Elena Ricci." "Elena Ricci," Lorenzo repeated, testing the weight of it. "You saw what 17 men could not. You saved the heir to the Moretti family." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. It was the cash he kept for emergencies. It had to be at least $10,000. He held it out to her. "Take it. Go home. Buy yourself something nice." Elena looked at the money. It was more than she made in a year. It could pay off her mother's medical debts. It could buy groceries for months. But she looked at Santino. He was sleeping peacefully now, the pain lines on his face smoothing out. "I don't want your money," Elena said quietly. The room went silent again. Nobody refused Lorenzo Moretti. "Excuse me?" Lorenzo narrowed his eyes. "I don't want money," Elena said, standing a little taller. "I want to finish my degree. I was kicked out of nursing school because I couldn't pay the tuition. I want to be a doctor, a real one, better than him." She pointed a shaking finger at Dr. Thorne. Lorenzo stared at her for a long moment. Then a slow, terrifying smile spread across his face. "You have spirit," he said. "Done. St. Jude's will pay for your education. Full ride. Dr. Sterling will arrange it personally. Won't you, Doctor?" Dr. Sterling nodded vigorously. "Of course, absolutely." "But," Lorenzo added, his voice dropping lower, "you don't just walk away, Elena. You know too much now. You know someone poisoned my son, which means someone in my circle is a traitor." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. "You recognize the poison," Lorenzo said. "You have the eyes of a hawk. Until my son is fully recovered, you aren't going back to nursing school. You are staying here. You are going to be his personal nurse. You will watch everything that goes into his body. You will be his food taster, his guard, his shadow." I can't," Elena stammered. "I'm just a cleaner." "Not anymore," Lorenzo said. He signaled to Luca. "Take her to the guest suite. Get her decent clothes. Burn those scrubs." As Luca guided a stunned Elena out of the room, she looked back one last time. Santino Moretti's eyes fluttered open. They were dark, confused, and dangerous. They locked onto hers for a split second before the door closed. She had saved his life. But as the heavy door clicked shut, sealing her inside the world of the Mafia, Elena realized she might have just signed away her own. For 3 days, Eleanor lived in a state of suspended animation. She wasn't a cleaner anymore, but she certainly didn't feel like a guest. She was a prisoner in high-end leisure wear. Luca, the scar-faced guard, stood outside her door at the St. Jude guest suite. Every meal was brought to her. She had no phone, no internet, and no contact with the outside world. Don Lorenzo had been clear. Until they knew who poisoned Santino, nobody went in or out without his permission. On the 4th morning, the door opened. "He's asking for you," Luca said. Elena swallowed hard. She smoothed down the grey silk blouse they had given her. It felt slippery and foreign against her skin. She preferred her rough cotton scrubs. At least in those, she knew who she was. She followed Luca down the hallway to room 1204. The room was different now. The army of doctors was gone. The machines were quieter. Sunlight streamed in through the blinds, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Santino Moretti was sitting up. He looked different than the dying boy she had seen on the bed. Even sitting against white pillows, he was imposing. His shoulders were broad, filling out the hospital gown. His hair, now washed and thick, was a dark, glossy raven black, but his eyes were the most arresting part. They were the color of espresso, dark, almost black, and currently burning with irritation. He was arguing with a nurse who was trying to adjust his IV. "Get off me," he growled, his voice raspy from disuse but commanding. "I don't need the drip. I need a steak and a scotch." "Mr. Moretti, please!" the nurse squeaked. "Get out!" Santino snapped. The nurse fled, brushing past Eleanor in the doorway. Santino turned his head. His gaze landed on Eleanor, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He raked his eyes over her, analyzing her from her nervous hands to her cheap shoes. "So," he said, "you're the maid." Elena felt a flash of annoyance. It cut through her fear. "I was a cleaner. Yes." "My father tells me I owe you my life," Santino said, his tone suggesting he found the idea insulting. "He says you spotted the mace's lines when the best specialists in the world were looking at charts." "They were looking for horses," Elena said, stepping into the room. "I was looking for zebras." Santino huffed. It might have been a laugh or a scoff. "And now you're my—" "What? My babysitter?" "Your father calls it a biosecurity asset," Elena said. "I call it a hostage." Santino's eyes narrowed. He beckoned her closer with a single finger. Elena hesitated, then walked to the side of the bed. "You think you're a hostage?" he whispered. "You have no idea. You stepped into a war, little cleaner. Do you know who poisoned me?" "No." "Neither do I," Santino said, his jaw tightening. "Which means it's someone who smiles at me, someone who shakes my hand." He looked at the tray of food, sitting untouched on the bedside table. It was hospital broth and jello. "My father says I'm not allowed to eat anything unless you check it first. Is that right?" "That's the order," Elena nodded. "Ridiculous." Santino reached for the glass of water on the table. "Don't!" Elena's hand shot out, grabbing his wrist. The contact was electric. His skin was warm, his pulse steady and strong under her fingers. Santino froze. He looked at her hand on his wrist, then up at her face. Nobody touched a Moretti without permission. "Let go," he warned softly. "No." Elena held firm. She took the glass from his hand. "The water comes from the tap, but the ice comes from the communal machine down the hall. Anyone could have accessed it." She held the glass up to the light. "See the cloudiness in the center of the cubes? It could be air, or it could be a precipitate." She walked to the bathroom, dumped the water, and rinsed the glass 3 times with hot water. She then opened a sealed bottle of Evian that had been delivered directly from the Don's private stock, poured it, and handed it back to him. "Now you can drink." Santino stared at her. He didn't take the glass immediately. He was studying her face, looking for fear, looking for deceit. He saw neither. He saw a stubbornness that matched his own. He took the glass. Their fingers brushed. "You're paranoid," he muttered, taking a sip. "I'm alive," Elena corrected him. "And so are you. You're welcome." Just then, the door burst open. A woman swept in. She was stunning, tall, with platinum blonde hair styled in perfect waves, wearing a white Chanel suit that probably cost more than Elena's parents' house. This was Sofia Vancelio. Elena recognized her from the tabloids. The Ice Princess, the daughter of the Vancelio crime family, and Santino's fiancé. "Santino!" Sofia cried out, rushing to the bed. The scent of expensive jasmine perfume filled the room, overpowering the antiseptic. "Oh, my poor darling, I've been so worried." She threw her arms around him, burying her face in his neck. Elena stepped back, fading into the wallpaper. She felt a strange, sharp pang in her chest she didn't want to acknowledge. Santino didn't hug her back with much enthusiasm. He patted Sophia's back awkwardly. "I'm fine, Sophia. I'm alive." Sophia pulled back, her eyes glistening with tears that didn't quite ruin her mascara. "When I heard, I thought I lost you. I've been praying every hour." She turned and finally noticed Eleanor. Her expression shifted instantly from adoration to disdain. She looked Elena up and down like she was a stain on the carpet. "Who is this?" Sophia asked, her voice sharpening. "Staff," Santino said quickly. Elena flinched. "Staff? She's the new nurse," Santino added, a little softer this time. My father insisted. "We have private doctors, Santino," Sophia said, reaching into her oversized Hermes bag. "We don't need random hospital staff. Look, I brought you your favorite, dark chocolate truffles from Le Chocolat. I know hospital food is dreadful." She held out a gold box. Santino reached for it. He loved dark chocolate. "Stop," Elena said. The room went silent. Sophia turned to Elena, her eyes wide with shock. "Excuse me?" "He can't eat that," Elena said, stepping forward. "Do you know who I am?" Sophia hissed. "I am his fiancée. I didn't poison him, you stupid girl." "I don't know who poisoned him," Elena said, her voice shaking, but her resolve ironclad. "That's the point. The poison used was thallium. It can be injected into chocolates easily. The bitterness of the dark chocolate masks the chemical taste perfectly. It's actually the classic delivery method." Sophia's face turned red. "How dare you! I bought these myself." "Did you watch them being made?" Elena asked. "Did you keep the box in your sight every second since you bought it? Did you leave it in the car with your driver? Did you leave it in the coat check?" Sophia opened her mouth, then closed it. She looked at the box in her hand. "Take a bite," Santino said. His voice was cold. Sophia looked at him. "What?" "If it's safe," Santino said, leaning back against the pillows. "Eat one, the one in the middle." Sophia looked at the truffle. Her hand trembled slightly. I'm on a diet, Tino. You know that. I can't have sugar." "Eat it," Santino commanded. Sophia hesitated. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Finally, she threw the box onto the bedside table. "This is ridiculous. I am not going to be interrogated by some scrub nurse. I came here to comfort you, not to be accused." She stormed out of the room, her heels clicking furiously on the tile. Santino watched her go. Then he looked at the box of chocolates. Then he looked at Elena. For the first time, the hardness in his eyes softened. He looked impressed. "You just kicked the future Mrs. Moretti out of my room," he noted. "She wouldn't eat the chocolate," Elena said quietly. "No," Santino mused. "She wouldn't." He picked up the gold box and handed it to Elena. "Send this to the lab. Tell my father I want to know exactly what's inside." Elena took the box. "Yes, Mr. Moretti." "Santino," he corrected her. "If you're going to save my life every 5 minutes, you can call me Santino." 2 days later, Santino was discharged. The transfer from St. Jude's to the Moretti estate was a military operation. 3 black SUVs, armored plating, bulletproof glass. Elena was placed in the middle car, sitting directly next to Santino. He was still weak, though he tried to hide it. Every bump in the road made him wince. Elena watched him carefully, tracking his respiration rate without him noticing. "Stop staring," he murmured, his eyes closed behind dark aviator sunglasses. "I'm doing my job," Elena replied, looking out the window at the passing city. "You're too good at it," he said. "It's annoying." The Moretti estate was less of a house and more of a fortress. High stone walls, iron gates, and armed guards patrolling the perimeter with German shepherds. As the car pulled up the long driveway, Elena felt a sense of dread. The hospital was neutral ground. This was the lion's den. They were greeted at the main entrance by the inner circle. Don Lorenzo was there, looking relieved. Beside him stood a man Eleanor hadn't met, Marco Moretti, Lorenzo's younger brother and Santino's uncle. He was a handsome man in his late 40s, with a smile that showed too many teeth. "Welcome home, nephew," Marco boomed, opening the car door. "The resurrection of Lazarus." Santino stepped out, leaning heavily on a cane he clearly hated. "Uncle Marco, good to see you." Elena scrambled out the other side, clutching her small bag of belongings. "And this must be the miracle worker," Marco said, turning his gaze on Elena. His eyes were cold, calculating, assessing her value. "The little nurse." "Elena," Santino said sharply, stepping in front of her. "Her name is Elena, and she's tired. Show her to her room." Elena was surprised. He was protecting her. The next few days settled into a tense routine. Elena slept in a room adjacent to Santino's. She prepared his meals herself in a small kitchenette, trusting no one in the main kitchen. She watched him take his pills. She watched him sleep. It was intimate. Too intimate. Late one night, a week after they arrived, Eleanor was in the library. Santino was working, ignoring doctor's orders to rest, reviewing ledgers at his massive mahogany desk. Eleanor was sitting on the sofa, reading a medical textbook she had found on the shelf. "Why medicine?" Santino asked suddenly, not looking up from his papers. Elena looked up. "What? Why did you want to be a doctor? Why not a lawyer or a chef?" Elena closed the book. "My mother died of ovarian cancer when I was 18. The doctors, they were busy, overworked. They missed the signs until it was stage 4. I promised myself I would be the one who didn't miss things." Santino finally looked up. The lamplight cast shadows across his sharp cheekbones. "And now you're here, babysitting a criminal." "You're a patient," Elena said. "Everyone deserves to live. Even bad men." "Especially bad men," Elena said softly. "Maybe if they live long enough, they can change." Santino stared at her, a strange intensity in his gaze. He stood up and walked around the desk. He moved better now, the strength returning to his legs. He stopped right in front of her. "I'm not going to change, Elena," he said, his voice low, vibrating in the quiet room. "I am what I am, but—" He reached out, his hand hovering near her face. He tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her jawline. Elena's breath hitched. Her heart hammered against her ribs, betraying her. "But I'm glad you're here," he finished. For a moment, the air between them was charged with something that had nothing to do with medicine and everything to do with the way he was looking at her mouth. Crash! A sound from the hallway broke the spell. Santino pulled back instantly, his hand going to the gun he now kept in his waistband. "Stay here." He moved to the door. Elena followed, despite his order. In the hallway, a maid was picking up shattered pieces of a vase. "I'm so sorry, sir. I slipped." Santino relaxed. "Clean it up." He turned back to the room, but Elena was frowning. She was looking at the maid. It was a new girl. Young, nervous. But she wasn't looking at the girl. She was looking at the cart the girl was pushing. It was the nightly laundry cart. Fresh towels, fresh sheets for Santino's bed. "Wait," Elena said. She walked over to the cart. She picked up a pillowcase. It was crisp, white, and smelled of lavender detergent. "What is it?" Santino asked, impatient. Elena brought the fabric to her nose. She sniffed. Then she touched the fabric. It felt slightly stiff. "Who does the laundry?" Elena asked the maid. The staff downstairs, miss," the maid stammered. "Mrs. Higgins." Elena rubbed the fabric between her thumb and forefinger. A fine, powdery dust came off. It was almost invisible against the white cotton. "Don't touch that!" Elena shouted, dropping the pillowcase. "Elena, what is wrong with you?" Santino asked. "It's not in the food," Elena whispered, her eyes widening in horror. "We were wrong. We've been checking the food, the water, the meds, but the poison, thallium sulfate, can be absorbed through the skin. It's transdermal." She pointed at the sheets. "They soaked the bed linens in a thallium solution. Every night you go to sleep, you wrap yourself in it. You breathe it in. You sweat into it, and it absorbs right back into your pores. That's why you got sick so slowly. That's why your hair fell out on the side you sleep on." Santino looked at the innocent-looking pile of laundry. His face went pale. "Who?" he demanded, grabbing the maid's arm. "Who prepared this cart?" I don't know," the maid cried. "I just picked it up from the laundry room. But I saw Mr. Marco down there earlier. He was yelling at Mrs. Higgins about the starch." "Marco." Santino released the maid. He looked at Elena. The romantic tension from moments ago was gone, replaced by a cold, deadly fury. "My uncle," he whispered. "My own blood." "We have to tell your father," Elena said. "No," Santino said. He walked back into the library and grabbed his phone. "If we tell my father, Marco will deny it. He'll blame the laundry staff. He'll cover his tracks." He turned to Elena. "We need proof, hard proof. And tonight is the annual Moretti Gala. Everyone will be there, including Marco." Santino checked the clip in his gun. He looked at Elena, and for the first time, he didn't look at her like a nurse. He looked at her like a partner. "Get dressed, Elena," he said grimly. "We're going to a party, and we're going to catch a rat." The annual Moretti Gala was not a party. It was a display of power. It was held in the great hall of the estate, a cavernous ballroom with crystal chandeliers the size of small cars and floors made of imported Italian marble. Tonight, the heavy oak doors were thrown open, and the city's elite, politicians, judges, rival crimes bosses, and high society socialites, streamed in, dripping in diamonds and deceit. Upstairs, in the master guest suite, Eleanor stared at herself in the mirror. She barely recognized the woman staring back. The team of stylists Santino had hired had transformed her. Her messy bun was now a sleek, sophisticated chignon. Her scrubbed-clean face was contoured and highlighted, her eyes smoky and mysterious. But it was the dress that took her breath away. It was a floor-length gown of deep, blood-red velvet. It was modest in the front, with a high neck, but the back plunged dangerously low. It fit her like a second skin, highlighting curves she usually hid under baggy scrubs. It was beautiful, but it felt like armor. "You look..." Elena turned. Santino was standing in the doorway. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit his broad shoulders perfectly, a black bow tie against a crisp white shirt. He looked every inch the Prince of Chicago, but his eyes were wide, caught off guard. "You look adequate," he finished, clearing his throat and adjusting his cufflinks. But the heat in his gaze told a different story. "I feel like an imposter," Elena admitted, smoothing the velvet over her hips. "I'm a nurse, Santino, not a spy. I can't do this." Santino walked over to her. He didn't touch her, but he stood close enough that she could smell the sandalwood and expensive whiskey on him. "You are the only person in this house I trust," he said, his voice low and intense. "Everyone downstairs? They want something from me. My money, my power, my death. You just wanted to save me. That makes you the most dangerous person in the room, Elena. Because you can't be bought." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small earpiece. "Put this in. I'll keep Marco busy in the ballroom. I'll make a toast, 'cause a scene if I have to." You need to get to his private office in the East Wing. It's the only place he'd keep records of the chemical purchase. He's arrogant, but he's a businessman. He keeps receipts for everything. Elena took the earpiece. And if he catches me? He won't, Santino said. Then his face hardened. But if he does, you scream, and I will burn the East Wing to the ground to get you out. They walked down the grand staircase together. As they descended, the hum of conversation in the ballroom died down. Hundreds of eyes turned to look at the resurrected heir and the mystery woman in red on his arm. Don Lorenzo was waiting at the bottom of the stairs. He looked at Elena, raised an eyebrow, and gave a nearly imperceptible nod of approval. "My son looks well," Lorenzo said to her. "The color has returned to his face." "The treatment is ongoing," Elena said professionally, though her heart was hammering against her ribs. "Enjoy the party," Lorenzo said, "but stay close to him. The sharks smell blood in the water." The first hour was a blur of introductions and fake smiles. Santino kept a possessive hand on the small of Elena's back, guiding her through the shark tank. She felt the eyes of Sofia Vantellio burning holes into her from across the room, but she focused on the mission. "Target is moving," Santino whispered into her ear, though his lips were moving against a glass of champagne. "Marco is heading to the bar. I'm going to intercept him. Go now." Elena slipped away. She moved through the crowd, looking for the servants' door that led to the East Wing. She was stopped by a waiter offering canapés. "Champagne, miss?" "No, thank you," she murmured, ducking past him. She found the door. It was locked. She looked around. Nobody was watching. She pulled a hairpin from her intricate updo. It wasn't a lockpick, but the lock was an old-fashioned skeleton key mechanism, not a digital keypad. She jiggled the pin, feeling for the tumbler. Click. She slipped inside the dark hallway. The noise of the party faded instantly, replaced by the silence of the empty wing. Elena took off her high heels, carrying them in one hand, and ran barefoot down the carpeted hall. Marco's office was at the end. The door was heavy oak. She tried the handle, locked. "Damn it," she whispered. She looked up. There was a transom window above the door. It was high, but there was a decorative marble bust of Julius Caesar on a pedestal next to the door. Putting her medical training of anatomy and leverage to use, she hoisted herself up, balancing precariously on the pedestal. She pushed the window open and squeezed through. It was a tight fit, and the velvet dress snagged, but she tumbled down onto the other side, landing on a plush Persian rug. She was in. The office was a shrine to ego. Hunting trophies lined the walls, lion heads, bear skins. Elena shuddered and moved to the desk. She didn't know the combination to the safe, but Santino had said Marco was a businessman. She started going through the physical files on the desk. Invoices for security upgrades, catering bills, laundry services. She pulled the file. It was from Clean Tech Industrial, a subsidiary company. She scanned the orders. Detergent, bleach, fabric softener, and there it was, buried in a sub-invoice for pest control supplies, dated 3 months ago. Thallium sulfate, 5 kW industrial grade. It was signed by Marco Moretti. Elena pulled her phone out of her clutch and snapped a photo of the document. She had it. Proof that Marco ordered the poison. "Got it," she whispered into her comms. "Santino, I have the invoice. I'm coming back." Static. "Santino?" Silence. Then a voice came through the earpiece, but it wasn't Santino's. "I'm afraid my nephew is a bit tied up at the moment, Miss Ricci." Elena's blood froze. It was Marco. "You're a clever girl." Marco's voice purred in her ear. "Finding the needle in the haystack. But you forgot one thing. I have cameras in my office." The door to the office clicked. The lock disengaged. Elena spun around. The door swung open. Standing there wasn't Marco. It was two of his personal guards, massive men with silenced pistols. "The boss wants a word," one of them grinned. "Bring the phone." Elena was marched back toward the ballroom, but not through the main entrance. They took her through the kitchen, up a service elevator, and onto the balcony that overlooked the great hall. Below, the party had stopped. The music had been cut. The crowd had formed a wide circle in the center of the dance floor. In the middle of the circle, Santino was on his knees. Two men were holding his arms behind his back. He had a cut on his lip, blood trickling down his chin onto his white shirt. Don Lorenzo stood nearby, looking pale and confused, held back by three of Marco's men. Marco Moretti stood in the center, a microphone in his hand, looking like a ringmaster. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marco boomed, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "I apologize for the interruption, but we have a traitor in our midst." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Elena was shoved to the railing of the balcony. The guard gripped the back of her neck, forcing her to look down. "Santino!" she screamed. Santino's head snapped up. He saw her. His eyes widened in panic. "Let her go, Marco! This is between us!" On the contrary, Marco smiled smoothly. "It's all about her." Marco gestured to the balcony. "Bring her down." The guards dragged Elena down the stairs and threw her onto the marble floor next to Santino. She scrambled to her knees, reaching for him. He leaned into her, checking her for injuries. "Did they hurt you?" he rasped. "No," she whispered, clutching her phone. "I have the photo. I have the proof." "It doesn't matter," Santino said bleakly. "Look around." Elena looked. The room was filled with guards, Marco's guards. The Don's men had been disarmed. This was a coup. "My friends," Marco addressed the crowd, playing the role of the grieving uncle. "For weeks, we have watched our beloved Santino wither away. We prayed for a cure. And then, this angel appeared." He pointed a mock-accusing finger at Elena. "A nurse, a nobody. She swooped in and saved him when the best doctors failed. A miracle, we thought." Marco shook his head sadly. But it wasn't a miracle. It was a con. He pulled a piece of paper from his pocket. It was a forgery. "I found this in Miss Ricci's room," Marco lied effortlessly. "A transfer slip. $5 million to be paid upon the death of Santino Moretti from an offshore account linked to a rival family in New York." "Liar!" Elena shouted. Her voice rang out clear and furious. "That's a lie. You ordered the thallium. I have the invoice on my phone." She held up her phone. Marco laughed. "A phone? You mean the phone you used to coordinate the attack?" He signaled to the guard. The guard snatched Elena's phone and smashed it onto the marble floor. He stomped on it until it was nothing but glass and plastic shards. "Oops," Marco smirked. "Clumsy." He turned to Don Lorenzo. "Brother, I'm sorry you have to see this. This girl poisoned your son, then cured him to gain his trust, all so she could get close enough to finish the job tonight. She put a second dose in his champagne. That's why he collapsed." Santino hadn't collapsed. He had been pistol-whipped. But the crowd didn't know that. They were whispering, looking at Elena with suspicion. It was a perfect frame job. The poor girl, the gold digger, the poisoner. It fit the narrative perfectly. "Lorenzo," Marco said, walking toward the Don. "You are too old, brother. You let a wolf into the henhouse because she had a pretty face. You are unfit to lead." Marco raised his hand. 10 guns clicked, aimed at Lorenzo and Santino. "Tonight, the Moretti family undergoes a restructuring," Marco announced. "Kill the girl. Take the Don to the basement. I will deal with my nephew personally." "No!" Santino roared. He struggled against his captors, surging to his feet with a strength that surprised them. He headbutted the guard to his left, hearing the crunch of a nose breaking. Chaos erupted. Screams filled the hall as guests scrambled for the exits. "Get down!" Santino tackled Eleanor, covering her body with his own as shots rang out. Bang! Bang! Marble chips exploded around them. "We need to move," Santino yelled. He grabbed Eleanor's hand and dragged her behind a heavy catering table. "My father!" Eleanor cried, looking across the room. Don Lorenzo had vanished in the crowd, surrounded by his own loyalists who were fighting hand-to-hand with Marco's mercenaries. "He can handle himself!" Santino shouted. "We are the targets!" They were pinned down. Marco was standing on the stage, safely behind a wall of bodyguards, watching the slaughter with a glass of wine in his hand. "You can't hide, Santino," Marco taunted over the PA system. "Give me the girl, and I might let you live as an exile." Santino looked at Eleanor. Her red dress was torn, her hair wild, her breathing shallow. She looked terrified, but she wasn't crying. She was scanning the room, her eyes darting from the exits to the guards. "The oxygen tanks," she said suddenly. "What?" "The catering station." Elena pointed to a cart near the kitchen doors. "They have portable creme brulee torches, and right next to them is the medical station for the elderly guests. There's an oxygen tank." Santino understood immediately. Pure oxygen plus fire. I saw boom. "Cover me," Santino said. He reached into his ankle holster, which the guards had missed, and pulled out a small backup pistol. "Santino, that's suicide." "No." He looked at her, and for a split second the chaos faded. "It's a distraction." He kissed her. It was hard, fast, and desperate. A kiss goodbye or a promise to return. "Stay down," he commanded. Santino popped up from behind the table. He fired 3 shots, not at the guards, but at the chandelier above Marco's head. Crystals rained down, forcing Marco to duck. In the confusion, Santino sprinted toward the catering cart. Bullets whizzed past him, tearing through his tuxedo jacket. He slid across the floor, grabbed the small propane torch, clicked it on, and threw it toward the oxygen tank. Then he fired a single bullet at the tank's valve. Boom! The explosion wasn't huge, but it was loud and bright. A fireball engulfed the serving station, setting off the fire sprinklers instantly. Water rained down on the ballroom. Smoke filled the air. The guests were screaming, stampeding. "Elena, now!" Santino shouted. Elena scrambled up, her wet velvet dress clinging to her legs. She ran to him. They burst through the kitchen doors, slipping on the wet tiles. "The garage!" Santino panted. He was limping again. "We need a car." They reached the underground garage. It was empty, except for Marco's convoy and a few guest cars. "Key!" Santino patted his pockets. "Damn it, I don't have a key." "We don't need a key," Elena said. She ran to a vintage 1960s Mustang. Old cars. No chips. She ripped the hem of her dress, grabbed a multi-tool from a nearby workbench, and jammed it into the ignition, twisting it with violent force. The engine roared to life. "You know how to hotwire a car?" Santino stared at her, stunned as he jumped into the passenger seat. "I grew up in the South Side," Elena yelled over the engine. "Buckle up!" She slammed the car into reverse, tires screeching, and sped toward the exit ramp. Just as they reached the ramp, a black SUV blocked their path. Marco stepped out, flanked by 3 men with assault rifles. "End of the road, nurse!" Marco shouted. Elena didn't slow down. She floored it. "Elena, what are you doing?" Santino yelled, bracing himself. "Physics!" Elena shouted. "Force equals mass times acceleration." She aimed the Mustang not at the SUV, but at the concrete pillar next to it. At the last second, she yanked the wheel. The Mustang drifted, its rear end smashing into the pillar, causing a section of the concrete ceiling to collapse right onto the SUV. Marco dove out of the way just in time as rubble buried his vehicle. The Mustang spun 180 degrees, battered but running. Elena straightened the wheel and punched the gas, shooting up the ramp and out into the rainy Chicago night. They were alive. But they were alone. Santino looked back at the estate, now glowing with police lights in the distance. "He has my father," Santino said, his voice hollow. "He has the house. He has the money." "He doesn't have the proof," Elena said. "I lost the phone, Santino, but I didn't lose my memory. I saw the invoice number. I saw the supplier." She looked over at him. Her makeup was running, her dress was ruined, and she was shaking with adrenaline. "We're going to get it back," she vowed. "We're going to take it all back." Santino looked at her, a mixture of awe and adoration on his face. He reached over and took her hand, interlacing their fingers on the gear stick. "Where to, Dr. Ricci?" Elena looked at the road ahead. "My turf," she said. "The south side. Marco won't look for us in a tenement building. It's time you saw how the other half lives." The rain battered the cracked windows of Eleanor's south side tenement. Inside, Santino sat on the sagging sofa, bleeding and out of bullets. "Hide in the closet," he ordered, gripping his empty pistol. Eleanor looked at her small kitchenette, then at the cleaning supplies under the sink. "No, I'm not hiding. This is my turf." She grabbed a bottle of ammonia and a jug of bleach. "He thinks I'm just a nurse. I'm a chemist." Minutes later, Marco Moretti kicked open the door. He strode in, flanked by 4 armed guards. "Come out, nephew. Let's finish this." The apartment was dark. Marco signaled his men to sweep the room. The lead guard kicked open the bathroom door, tripping a wire Elena had strung across the threshold. A bottle of ammonia tipped into a bucket of bleach. The reaction was instant. A cloud of deadly chloramine gas erupted, filling the small space. The guards screamed, clawing at their burning eyes and throats. "Gas, get back!" Marco choked, stumbling into the hallway, blinded and wheezing. Santino emerged from the shadows like a wraith. He didn't need to see. He knew where they were by their coughing. 2 sharp cracks echoed as he pistol-whipped the blinded guards into unconsciousness. Marco scrambled toward the fire escape window, gasping for air. He climbed out onto the rusting metal grate, only to find Eleanor standing there, holding Santino's backup piece. "Going somewhere?" she asked. Marco sneered, wiping tears from his eyes. "You won't shoot. You took an oath to do no harm." "I took an oath to protect my patient," Elena countered. Behind her, Santino stepped out. He looked at his uncle, then at the corroded bolts, holding the railing to the brick wall. "Uncle," Santino said coldly, "you really should pay attention to maintenance." He kicked the rusted bolt. Snap! The railing gave way. Marco screamed as he tumbled backward, falling 4 stories into a dumpster filled with wet trash. He survived, but the snap of his leg echoed through the alley. Sirens wailed, not police, but a convoy of limousines. Don Lorenzo had retaken the city. He stepped out of the lead car as Santino and Eleanor exited the building. Lorenzo looked at the broken Marco, then at the girl in the torn red dress. He took off his coat and draped it over her shoulders. "You saved my son. You saved my house. The debt is yours to name." "No debt," Santino interrupted, lacing his fingers through Elena's. "She's family. Dr. Elena Ricci Moretti, valedictorian." Applause thundered through the University of Chicago Hall. Elena walked across the stage, her doctoral hood flowing over her shoulders. In the front row, Don Santino Moretti stood up, clapping the loudest, looking at his wife with pure reverence. Later that night, on the balcony of their penthouse, Santino handed her a glass of wine. "To the doctor," he toasted, "who saw what the world missed." Elena smiled, looking at the city lights. She traced the rim of the glass, checking it out of habit. "It's safe," Santino laughed, pulling her close. I know, she whispered, listening to the strong, steady heartbeat she had saved. But a good doctor always double-checks. And that is the story of how one sharp-eyed girl brought down a Mafia empire with nothing but a mop and her medical knowledge. I hope you guys enjoyed this roller coaster of a romance. It just goes to show that sometimes the most powerful person in the room isn't the guy with the gun. It's the person who pays attention to the details everyone else ignores. What did you think of Elena's revenge with the cleaning supplies? Was that genius or what? Let me know in the comments below. If you were in her shoes, would you have saved Santino, or would you have run for the hills the moment you saw the Mafia guards? If you enjoyed this story, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. I upload brand new dramatic tales every week. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.